Rep the South Side whenever you pay with your White Sox debit card from Windrust Community Banks and score perks like free ATMs, no monthly fees, and a $300 opening bonus. Pay with pride every time with Windrust, Chicago's bank.
Hey everybody, it's Chuck Arfine. Welcome back to the White Sox Podcast, brought to you as always by Windrust, Chicago's bank. Show your team pride with a White Sox debit card. Get yours at wintrust.com/Sox, member FDIC, lender. All right, today on the podcast, we're throwing it back, and we're looking forward with my old friend and colleague, Vinnie Duber, who's back on the podcast to talk about the White Sox team. The last time he was on the podcast, February of 2022, and we're going to talk about what happened to that team, where the White Sox are right now, and where we think and certainly hope that they are going. Because I checked out the White Sox box score from opening day 2022, just 3 years ago, the time when the White Sox were expected to contend for a World Series. And to see what has happened to every single player who played in that game, and even some players who did not play in that game, it is both shocking and also quite revealing about the White Sox of that era, the team they were facing that day, the Tigers, and where they are right now, and also where the White Sox are right now, and the road that they are hopefully taking to become contenders again. So, what happened to the White Sox? And the path forward with the White Sox with Vinnie Duber. Let's do it. Okay, Vinnie Duber is back on the podcast. Vinnie, I know I saw you just a few days ago, but it is great to see you back on the podcast. It is so good for my White Sox soul. So, Vinnie, welcome back to the podcast.
Happy to be here. It's just like riding a bike, Chuck, right? I'll be picking it up all over again in no time, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Guarantee. A lot has happened to all of us in the last few years. White Sox and you. I mean, we were together at NBC Sports Chicago. That network no longer exists. You were at 𝗪𝗪𝗀𝗀. Tell White Sox fans what you've been up to lately.
Yeah, I mean, just trying to get back out at the ballparks, I should say, plural. So, I've been fortunate enough to be doing some freelance work for the Sun-Times lately. So if you want to know what's going on in Chicago baseball every weekend, I've been there and hopefully will continue to be there, whether that's South Side or North Side, depends on who's at home. They usually flip those guys around. So last 2 weekends of was covering the Cubs, and obviously they got a lot going on up there too. But it'll be good to get back down on the South Side soon.
We're only going to talk about the south side of town on this podcast.
Of course, yes.
The north side doesn't exist in our world. So, but for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to talk about the White Sox. And you're for many reasons, the perfect person to talk about this topic that I wanted to speak about, which is about what happened to the White Sox. And I know White Sox fans are like, yeah, we know what happened. We know what happened. But I think there was something that I found that we're going to talk about on this pod that really, really spoke to me about what happened and why things went so poorly for the White Sox and the moment when it happened, if you want to call it a moment, the kind of line of demarcation, which we're going to get to. And then there is to today. And what are we looking at today, looking forward from this point we're at right now? And I think it'll kind of bookend from 2022 to now and the future. So that's going to kind of give everyone a heads up of what we're talking about before you decide to just throw this podcast into the lake, because we're going to start by talking about the last time you were on this podcast, Vinnie, which was, I looked it up, February of 22. It was the high point right before you left. It was, things could not be any better for the White Sox. And seemingly me having you on the podcast, because I was such a big fan of you being on the podcast, but you went on to greener pastures, and I understand. But it was February of 2022. The White Sox were coming off an AL Central title, and we thought the next step, like many people thought, the next step in 22 was going to be huge. Isn't that what you thought?
I mean, certainly I didn't expect them to go 500 and miss the playoffs, but I mean, they were the favorite far and away, really, in the AL Central at the very least. And I do kind of remember back to the fan base's feeling, and I thought that there was like a bit of apprehension because of the way that 21 ended, right, with that playoff series against Houston, in which the White Sox really were overmatched. Now, again, that was a great Houston team. I mean, there's really no shame in not being as good as those Astros, but I feel like the fan base was, even though that was the most successful season that the White Sox had since they won the World Series, I felt like the fan base was just like not happy about the way that it ended in 21 and like not happy. Hey, they just went to the playoffs. First time ever they had gone to the playoffs in 2 consecutive seasons. And the fan base was like, ooh, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. And it turned out that those folks were right. But in terms of what we thought watching, from where we were, yeah, they were supposed to be one of the better teams in the American League. And I don't know if, anybody was necessarily picking them to win the World Series or be the best team in baseball or anything like that. But they were a contender, no doubt about it. And very quickly, it became clear that was not the case.
I looked this up today. ESPN, before the season, asked 38 writers to make their season predictions for 2022. Want to guess, of the 38, how many picked the White Sox to win the Central Division?
Oh, I would say 35 at least.
34. The
Close.
Twins got 4 votes. And of those 4 people who did not vote for the White Sox to win the division, 3 picked the White Sox to be a wild card team. So there was somebody out there. One of the 38 said, Sox are a paper tiger. They're not going to be good. They're not even going to make the playoffs this year. So I don't know who that writer was, but he or she was spot on. And the White Sox went, as you said, 81-81. They finished 11 games behind the Guardians. Do you want to guess how many writers picked the White Sox to win the pennant?
I would say not many. I would say 10. Maybe that's too high. 10.
No, you nailed it. 10.
Oh.
But that's actually a big number.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than a quarter. Yeah, for sure.
16 picked the Blue Jays. 10 picked the White Sox. The Astros, who beat the White Sox in the ALDS, got 1 vote. And they won the World Series that year. So anyway, White Sox had 5 votes to win the World Series. Clearly, they were nowhere near it. The Astros beat the Phillies in 6. Giolito got 7 votes for the Cy Young Award for predictions. And 𝗚liche got 2. So let's harken back to opening day of 2022. If we only knew then what we know now. It was April 8th, 2022 in Detroit. Tim Anderson was not playing, by the way. Suspended for the first 2 games for bumping umpire Tim Timmons in Detroit in late September. This was after Jose Abreu slid hard into second base. So to see what's happened to TA, he was that year, he played only 79 games, but he batted .301. That was his last good season in the majors. He's now with the Angels batting .176. He's batting 9th. I mean, is he the guy that like symbolizes what happened to the White Sox more than anybody?
Maybe. I think the sad thing is that there's so many to choose from, right? I mean, it's really all the same story for the most part, whether you're talking about TA, whether you're talking about Yoan Moncada, who also was not in that opening day lineup that day, on the IL, if memory serves. Eloy Jimenez, those 3 are really the exact same story. Just they couldn't stay healthy and they got hurt not just all the time, but at the wrong time, right? And so you got whichever manager it was, and I'm sure you'll get to the fact that there's been multiple managers since that day, writing lineups with a team that they thought that they weren't going to have. So, I think that the pitchers, you could say similar stuff about. There's so many people all over the diamond. But yeah, those 3 guys, TA, Moncada, Eloy, I only don't put Luis Robert Jr. in there because he's still here, I guess. But, he kind of has a similar story as well, maybe with a little more in the underperformance category than in the injury category, just because now we've seen a few years of that. But you're going to be hearing the word injuries a lot as we go through and talk about what has become of that team.
All right, everybody, put your thinking caps on. Who led off for the White Sox on opening day 2022. It wasn't TA because he was suspended. This person played right field, and this kind of symbolized just the problems of this era. This person had only played 5 games in right field in his career at that point, and he'd been in the majors for like 10 years. And you're still thinking, and you're still thinking. Some of you might already know this, and if you do, I did not. AJ Pollock led off. AJ Pollock, 2023 would be his last season in the majors. Vinny, should I just go through this very quickly, or should we just go through this a little like one by one by one? I'm not sure if the fans can deal with the misery.
I mean, I think you go through the lineup quickly. I mean, I think people know the main cast, but I mean, really, like I mentioned before, like it is kind of one big story. It is kind of one theme running throughout. And I think that's what probably makes it so frustrating for folks too, is that it's like, you can't like necessarily be like, I blame that person. If only that person had done what they were supposed to. I mean, the whole team got hurt. Like you look up and you just go, wow. I mean, what are the odds of this happening? So I'd run down the lineup, although I'll tell you this, on the pitching side, there were some, you might want to go in a little more in depth on that, because there were some guys in that box score on the pitching side who, their stories, while similar, certainly deserve maybe a little bit more expansion.
Okay, so here we go. Luis Robert Jr. batted second. By the way, and then we're going to decide who is having the best season right now in 2025. Everybody, this is going to shock you. The one that I came up with, who I think is having the best season, you would come up with 30 guesses, 50, and you wouldn't guess this person. All right, Luis Robert Jr. batted second. He's right now, I'll say this about him. He is batting 152. He's slugging 272. He leads the American League in stolen bases as we tape this. He's on pace for 93 walks. If you would have told me in 2022 that in 2025, Luis Robert Jr. would lead the American League in stolen bases in late April and be on pace for 93 walks, I'd be saying it happened. He reached his potential. We have an MVP candidate. Unfortunately, as I said, he's batting 152 and slugging 272. So I don't know what to make of him. Then it was Jose Abreu, out of baseball. Yasmani Grandal, he's in the minors with the Red Sox. Eloy Jimenez, minors with the Rays. Larry Garcia, out of baseball. He played Winter League in Dominican Republic this past winter. The second baseman was Josh Harrison. He's been out of baseball since 23. Your DH, batting eighth, Andrew Vaughn.
Wouldn't be the only position he played that year.
No. He played what, left, right, and second?
Yes, I think that moonlight appearance at second base in Kansas City, that was really something.
So he's an OPS plus right now for 38. Number 9 hitter. Everyone think. Yohan Kata was not there. Of course, he had an oblique strain, missed the first month of the year. He's with the Angels now, by the way. Strained his thumb in spring training, has not played a regular season game with the Angels. Your number 9 hitter in this lineup, opening day 2022, was Jake Burger.
Yohan Moncada has played a regular season game with the Angels. He played the White Sox in the opening series of the season. Oh,
that's right. You're right. My bad. Thank you for correcting me.
But he hasn't played much. We'll put it. That's true. Yeah.
How many games has he played? I believe the answer is what? 2
games? Might be 2 or 3. I think those games against the Sox are the only ones. Yeah.
Okay. Jake Burger, he did hit 29 homers last year with the Marlins, but right now he's batting 174. He has 3 homers, an OPS plus of 54. And so that is not trending well for him. I mean, I had just not even gotten to the pitching, and I saw that. And of course, I know, everyone listening or watching this podcast, we all have lived this. But to see that 3 years ago, in 3 years, all those players, all of them, every single one of them is just either out of baseball or struggling mightily, is stunning, is shocking. And could anyone have seen this coming? And I'm not trying to defend the front office here. I'm just cannot believe that this is what has happened here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, folks, White Sox fans have lived it, right? I mean, it's been surprising, not just surprising, it's been shocking to watch that you could assemble all the talent that the White Sox did, and that it completely just goes by the wayside. That you're talking about a lineup from just 3 years ago where only 2 guys are on the team still, and maybe obviously it's easy to say this while their numbers are what they are here in the first month of the season, but might not have much of a future with this team beyond this year, right? So you're talking about a complete do-over. I already mentioned the fact there's been multiple managers since opening day of 2022. How about the fact that the front office has completely changed over as well? So it is not just that previous rebuilding effort failing to reach the heights that everybody thought that it was going to. It's the fact that it's just been complete. The turnover, the makeover has been complete. And you're looking at now a new rebuilding project that is, in the stages that in 2022, those were 3 years, in the past. So it's shocking that it could go from that to that this quickly. But again, injuries, they are not good. And
injuries and underperformance.
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah, that definitely is part of it. And if it were just injuries, some of those guys would still be on this roster, right? Like, as you were saying, listing some of those guys would be like, oh, they're no longer with the White Sox, no longer with the White Sox. Well, they were supposed to be. There were a lot of those guys that you just read that should still be with the White Sox under normal or more normal circumstances. What about guys who the White Sox not only decided to trade, you talk about Eloy Jimenez, Jake Berger, the starting pitcher, and 𝗵𝗂 𝗠𝗔𝗍, who you'll get to in a moment. Those guys were decided to be traded to kind of restart the rebuilding effort there. But then you've got guys who at the time it was a question about whether they would be back with the White Sox, right? Tim Anderson's underperformance obviously made that decision a little easier, but there was an option there that the White Sox had built into that contract that he could still have played longer with the team. Certainly, Moncada had that option as well. And what about Jose Abreu? I mean, let's go back to the last game of the season, which I believe was it? Oh, no, it wasn't on the South Side. But the last game was on the South Side. It was on the South Side, not in Detroit. But let's go back to that. And the conversation we were all having was, well, should they bring him back? He was their best hitter that year. In fact, that was one of his better seasons offensively in his career. If you look at some of the numbers, the question was, should they bring him back? Should they re-sign him? They chose not to. And he went to Houston and he got a big deal from them, which obviously turned out in hindsight to look terrible. But that was the question then. So the White Sox not only saw this kind of all of these guys make their way out of town, a lot of it was the decisions that the White Sox made to bring an end to that for various reasons. But man, to have that kind of turnover, it's really surprising as you go down the list.
What's really interesting as this is all unfolding as we talk about this is not only did everybody who was with the White Sox from that team end up failing, everybody who was traded or ended up leaving, other than maybe Ronaldo Lopez, as we speak right now. No, isn't Lopez is hurt. Yeah. Basically everybody. So I'll just say it. Everybody who was traded away, where the White Sox either said, we don't want him anymore, you have him and we'll trade you, or we don't want you anymore, and they signed somewhere else. Everybody made the bad decision of bringing these players on. There's not one success story, except it might just be this person. This is the guy. As we get to the pitching staff, it's not 𝗵𝗂 𝗠𝗔𝗍. I mean, he signed a 2-year, $38 million deal with the Red Sox. He's going to make his first start this week after missing 16 months. Then there was Bennett Sosa. Is it Sousa or Sosa?
Oof, I don't remember. I think it's like John Philip Sousa. At least that's how it's spelled. But the pronunciation eludes me at the moment.
All right. He came in after that. He's pitched a few innings for the Astros this year. Kyle Crick. The White Sox cut him in June. He hasn't pitched in the majors since. Kendall Graveman had a torn labrum, missed all of 2024. He's trying to come back with the Diamondbacks.
He had a good year after they traded him, though. He was good for Houston after they traded him. We can at least say that.
Okay. All right. So Kendall Graveman. Here's the guy. Is Aaron Bummer the best player that played in this game today?
I don't know. He's not doing very well either.
I mean, he's got a 3.72 ERA. Is that the best of that 2022 team that played on that day, opening day, 2022? And if you would have said that 3 years ago, that would be the case. You would be like, are you kidding me?
Today, yes. Today he is. Let's see what Lucas does in his first start before making that declaration completely for the remainder of the season. But yeah,
well, I mean, even like right now.
Well, even
right now,
the one guy you haven't gotten to yet.
Okay,
the guy who pitched last in that game, Liam Hendriks, who blew the save that day. He is off to a rocky start in his long overdue comeback from injury with also the Boston Red Sox. I believe it was the White Sox who greeted him rudely not too long ago. So it's just tough to see a lot of these guys. And it is tough to see a lot of these guys who, we enjoyed talking to too. You know what I mean? Obviously fans, they care about the performance on the field, that kind of thing. But, you rattle off these names, Lucas, Liam, Aaron Bummer, Reynaldo, like these were good guys to talk to that we had good conversations with over the years, and that we're talking about them in this light is certainly somewhat upsetting.
All right, so mercifully we're done with that part of the conversation, and we are now entering the second phase of what I want to talk about, and this does circle back to the White Sox. And
Chuck, we didn't even get to what else I did that day. So not only did I sit through that game, which was a good game, by the way, but not only did I cover that game in Detroit, I went to the Jack White concert in Detroit that evening. You might remember if you watched that game, he played the national anthem at the Tigers home opener that day.
Didn't know that.
That night, I went to see him at the Masonic Temple in Detroit, and he got married on stage during that concert.
That is a much better experience than watching the White Sox lose opening day to the Tigers. Well done. Got married on the stage. Was it a surprise that anyone knows was happening?
It was. So it was no, it was a surprise. It was his girlfriend at the time, now his wife, was is a fellow music artist. She opened the show. She was the opening act. Wow. And in the middle of the show, he proposed to her on stage. He brought her out to play a song and then proposed to her in the middle of that song. And then before the encore, there was an on-stage wedding ceremony. So I attended Jack White's wedding. Just wanted to slip that in there. That also happened that day. Yeah.
That is amazing. Thanks for putting that in the podcast. That's much better than the 2022 White Sox. So what I wanted to get to was the Tigers lineup that day and why this is important for everybody today. Because that Tigers team in 2022 is essentially the White Sox of 2025. The guy making his major league debut that day, Spencer Torkelson. Javier Baez was the big addition. I mean, can you believe they actually made that signing for Javier Baez to spend all that money, and they were nowhere near being able to compete, but they did. That team lost 96 games. But what
opening day starter that day was a big free agent signing as well, right? Eduardo Rodriguez.
Exactly. They were trying to win in some weird way. I applaud them for spending money, but it clearly did not work for them at all.
Worked that day. Baez hit the game-winning hit, so I guess it worked that day.
Yeah, but I mean, those are humongous sunk costs.
Oh, yeah.
Javier Baez and Rodriguez. I mean, Baez is making, $25 million a year. He's betting ninth on that team right now because they have nowhere else to put him. But in 2023, who did the Tigers add to their team? Jake Rogers, Riley Green, Kerry Carpenter, Zach McKinstry, Tarik Skubal, Reese Olson. They won 78 games that year. 2024, last year they won 84, and now look at them. They're off to a great start. So you saw two franchises, two ships passing in the night. And I would really like to think that this current White Sox team is basically where the Tigers were in 22 and hopefully there's a similar arc. And we'll get to why I think these players who are in the system and are already here right now could play a big role in making that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think with Detroit, what you got to look at is, and you kind of, lead into it there with the moves that they made that offseason, it doesn't always go the way that you want it to go or as quickly as it does, right? I mean, Torkelson is a guy who he came up with such hype. He was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And then his career has not gone smoothly since then. His major league career has not gone smoothly. But now, look at him now. He's killing it all of a sudden, right? And again, it's only been a month, but he's having a great season. He's helping lead that lineup. I think the Tigers probably wished that a guy that they spent the number one pick on would have taken a little quicker than what's it been 3 years to go ahead and become that true reliable centerpiece of a lineup like that. That might be the case when some of these big name White Sox prospects come up. I mean, when Colson Montgomery finally comes up, I know he's turned things around a little bit after a really cold start. When he finally comes up, maybe he's not going to be just blasting off to the races. And again, I don't think White Sox fans necessarily need that reminder after watching all the guys that we talked about in the first part of this, right? But it goes to show you that Detroit's path is not the one you would draw up, yet they get to where a lot of folks, that in that town want them to be.
I think if I can make it as simple as possible, the White Sox hitch their wagons for the most part financially to too many of the wrong guys. We didn't necessarily think it at the time, but they were all in on so many of those guys that we talked about. All in. They weren't going to trade any of them. They felt like they spent a lot of money on them, and they felt that they were going to finish their contracts, or at least give them many more solid years, good years, hopefully great years than they got. And I hope the lesson is that the next wave of this team, and we're starting to see them, you're going to get more for your money. And it's a whole new front office, and I think they're looking into a little bit more about who they're acquiring. This is nothing really against a lot of those guys, but boy, and if there is something, if you can like flip a switch and you have all of a sudden you've made all the right decisions, they're not going to make all the right ones, but it's just that. I don't know, Vinny, I mean, how would you sum up how it all just went to so quickly with all of those players who were supposed to be good?
Yeah, I mean, it was injuries. You know what I mean? I think that's the main thing. Now, obviously, when they would get in the games, it didn't always go according to plan either. And so there is a lot in that underperformance column that you alluded to earlier. Absolutely. Again, I think it's easy to say in hindsight, those were the wrong guys because they didn't pan out, right? There were maybe folks who had different viewpoints than most that could give you greater insight into that. But you look at those guys on paper and boy, that looked like a lineup that could be excellent for a long, long time. But how about another team that maybe hasn't lived up to the expectations that it had by going much the same route that the White Sox did? Look at what's going on down in Atlanta. I mean, that's a team that's kind of desperate to stay near the top of a division that has kind of passed them by a little bit with how good the Mets have been. The Phillies have obviously spent a ton of money over the years on their lineup as well. When you spend all that money early, you're committed. And I think the White Sox were absolutely committed to those guys. I think that they hoped probably that it would be cost effective in the long run, that you get these guys signed to these long contracts when they're young. They haven't hit their ceiling yet. Oh boy, we got Luis Robert Jr., for 6-7 years. He's going to be so great. We're going to be spending so much lower on him and the rest of those guys than the market would dictate. Oh, it's going to be great. But it didn't work out that way. As you look at things moving forward, it's a different front office. Maybe the approach is different. And heck, maybe the trends are different by then in Major League Baseball, right? I mean, you've got some guys now who are like, hey man, I want to go to free agency. I don't need this lower cost deal right off the bat because I'm going to be fantastic and I'm going to bet on myself to get to where I can get a much bigger payday. Who knows what the trends are going to be like? The one big difference I see between White Sox rebuild the last one and White Sox rebuild this one is that that was very position player heavy, and the top guys that are in this new class, whatever you want to call it, are the pitchers, right? Are certainly the two, Schultz and Smith. They're right at the top. They're the highest rated ones. Now they got Montgomery, they got Caro. I mean, these are well-regarded young players who obviously they hope can be cornerstones. But when all those guys in the last rebuild were prospects, what were we doing on this podcast, Chuck? We were doing podcasts that were projecting the White Sox 2022 lineup, and it's all these homegrown young guys. And what a great thing that'll be. They won't have to spend money on any free agents at all. And then you look at the guys they did get, it didn't work out. I mean, who was the catcher in that game? 𝗪𝗻 Grandal, right? I mean, talk about another guy who didn't pan out, and that wasn't a prospect that they spent early on. That was a big free agent target that they thought was going to be like that cherry on top piece. Didn't work out. Why? Injuries for the most part. The guy couldn't stay healthy. But it's an interesting thing to look back, because I don't know how many of those pitfalls could necessarily be avoided by a new front office. I mean, I don't think anybody says, give me the number one prospect in baseball, 𝗂𝗏 𝗏𝗀. We're going to trot him out there, and he's going to get hurt all the time. Give me the number 3 prospect in baseball, 𝗭𝗏 Jimenez. We're going to trot him out there, and he's going to get hurt all the time. It's not that they were just, it's one injury here that knocked him out for a season. It's one injury there that made this month a tough month for the team. They were hurt constantly, and that's what buried that team. Again, there was a lot of other things going on there, and there's a reason that there's been, how can we count them? Tony La Russa was the opening day manager in 2022. Miguel Cairo finished that season as the manager. Then they hired Pedro Grifol. He was fired in the middle of last season. Grady Sizemore. So we're on 4. Now we're on 5. Will Venable. 5 managers since opening day 2022. So there's a lot more going on there than just one thing. And I think that's what a lot of folks need to realize, is that, that kind of
instability.
Just in general too. I mean, when Jerry Reinsdorf makes the decision to move on from Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, he put in somebody who was already there, but look at what Chris Getz has done all around him. None of those people that were there with him are still there anymore. I mean, it's a completely different group, not just on the field, not just in the minor leagues, but in the manager's office, in the front office, all over the place.
Yes. When I watch this White Sox team, I'm not exactly watching for hoping that Joshua Palacios turns out. My apologies to Joshua. I'm more focused on, all right, Chase Meidroth. All right, that seems like a win. Edgar Quero, that seems like a win. Brooks Baldwin, I don't know what he's going to be, but I mean, at least he's giving us something. 13 RBIs, he's got more RBIs than Mookie Betts, Juan Soto, Vlad Jr., and Marcus Semien here in the month of April.
Chuck's starting the Brooks Baldwin All-Star campaign right now. It sounds
Here we go. Let's go. Brooks Baldwin. I wouldn't mind seeing some more walks from him, but I mean, you can't complain about him. And then, the hitters I think most of the hitters are still in the minor leagues who are going to be a part of this future. It's Kyle Teal, it's Braden Montgomery, it's hopefully Colson Montgomery, Caleb Bonham, Tim Elko, maybe at some point. And so that's going to be a part of this nucleus. They have the 10th overall pick this year. You got to hit a home run on that one. And you can do that with the 10th overall pick. They should be the first overall pick, but that's a whole other story. And then they're going to be probably a top 3 pick next year for this season that's coming. It's probably going to be 100 losses. So, you start to see, what's coming, what this team is going to be about. And I haven't even gotten into the pitchers, and that seems to be really have a strong foundation for the future. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with what Chris Getz's group has done in terms of bringing in talent. They've done a good job. There's been fewer opportunities maybe than Rick Hahn had the last time they were at this point in the cycle, right? We talked for years about those trades of Chris Sale and Adam Eaton and Jose Quintana and what those were able to reap. Chris Getz obviously hasn't had those same opportunities, and it looks like Luis Robert Jr. is going to have to really turn it on in order to give him another one before the end of the season here. But it looks good. They've got a highly thought of farm system. They got a lot of highly thought of prospects. I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's still pitching heavy. I think you're probably going to see, even if it all works out, you're going to have to see some work being done to kind of fill in that lineup probably, and we're talking years down the road maybe. But the Garrett Crochet trade was seemingly very good. But Chuck, the way you phrased it right there, you should know better than to do that within this podcast episode. You're saying Chase Meidroth, that's a win. Edgar Quero, that's a win.
I think that seems like a win.
So did Luis Robert Jr. and Yoan Moncada and Tim Anderson and 𝗭𝗏 Jimenez. Those guys all seemed like wins too when they came up. So I mean, it's been a few days. You got to give these guys sometimes a few weeks in the case of Meidroth. But you got to give this a little more time to see what you can get, because getting guys to the majors, as you just laid out, because we can go back and look at the 2022 opening day lineup. Getting guys to the majors is not the end all be all. These guys have to be successful. There's a reason that coaching staffs are very important. There's a reason that front offices have guys like Brian Bannister, right, that can go down and continue that development even once they hit the major leagues. So it's looking like they're certainly got things going in the right direction. I think the things that the White Sox can be most proud about is probably what Chris Getz has done to the behind the scenes stuff, right? The way that this organization works compared to the way it worked several years ago is probably a little bit more updated. Probably looks a little bit more like the rest of Major League Baseball does than it did a few years back. That behind the scenes stuff that won't get fans excited in any sort of way is probably his biggest accomplishments so far. But yeah, the players got to hit. That's at the end of the day. They've got to hit, with a bat and just hit in terms of being good because, whether they're hitters or pitchers, because we can go back and look at a farm system that was loaded with guys that we thought were going to be future all-stars, that were going to be, future Silver Sluggers and future Cy Young candidates, and it just never materialized. So going from that 2021 AL Central Championship team where, like you said at the start of this show, the sky was the limit. They were ready to take the next step. They didn't. They tumbled down the hill quickly. That can happen to any team in baseball, and especially one that's not built yet, like the White Sox current situation is.
Yeah, I think I said it seems like 𝗏 is a hit. But they're on tape, so everyone can listen if I said it or not. But I didn't mean he's 100% a hit. I mean, who knows? I think it seems like they're going in the right direction with him and 𝗏. I've been very impressed with them. I would like to think that there's just more of a base with what they're building here, more of a stronger foundation in the minor leagues with these players that when they get to the major leagues, there will, the floor isn't going to just, collapse and everything is just going to just completely fall to the ground. And that's the end, because that's just what it seemed to happen with this. The rug was just pulled from under this entire organization and they couldn't do anything about it.
And depth too, right? I mean, look how important it is to have depth. I mean, the White Sox in that time had, the top prospect at every position on the field, but then what was there after? I mean, Yoán Moncada goes down and gets hurt. Who's backfilling? Eloy Jimenez gets hurt. Yeah. Who's backfilling?
Well, in 21, they actually had the answers when all those guys got hurt. There was the Brian Goodwins and Gavin Sheetses of the world, but that worked out for 1 year.
Well, and not only that, Sheets is a different story, but Brian Goodwin, Jake Lamb, Billy Hamilton, those guys were all free agent signings. Those guys, I mean, that wasn't a reflection of what how deep the farm system was. That was good role players being brought in who happened to have good seasons. And that didn't always happen when an injury replacement was needed.
Yeah. So for this to work, they got to, hopefully a lot of these prospects hit. They don't all have to, but many do. A lot of it's going to come down to the player themselves and development, the coaching that they get, and the continuing to advance. And yes, staying healthy.
That's the biggest key right there.
So I can't predict the future, but like the pitchers, I mean, right now you look at who's in this rotation. Shane Smith might be a part of this future rotation for the next 5 years. Davis Martin can be a part of this. Sean Burke, I mean, he's been off and on. Jonathan Cannon, off and on. But listen, Hagen Smith, Noah Schultz, Grant Taylor. I mean, if you just jump ahead 2 years and these guys will all be in the major leagues, this is going to be a team, I believe, to get excited about. And this payroll that the White Sox have right now is really low. And I can't promise you how much money is going to be spent, but money will be spent and this team will be better. And I just really hope that they will be like the Tigers are now, which gives them a chance to win a division and then make the playoffs and just be a team that has a chance to win it all, because that's what we all want.
Someday, I think the idea is that I think the idea is that this is still just taking time, right?
A work in progress.
Absolutely. And you mentioned 3 pitchers there who are really, really something to be excited about if you're a White Sox fan, and Schultz, Smith, and Taylor. Get excited about what those guys can do, no doubt about it. But they got to get here first. They got to get here first. They got to be able to get big league hitters out. That might be something that doesn't click right away. I mean, I brought up Spencer Torkelson on the position player side for the Tigers. How about another Tiger, 𝗪cie 𝗏𝗍, a guy who was, a huge deal prospect coming up. It didn't happen. And now all of a sudden, these years later, it's happening for Detroit. So again, early in the season for Detroit, things can obviously still turn in many different directions for them, just like it can any team. But that pitching is something that the White Sox seemingly have in the minor leagues. That is something for folks to get excited about, but it doesn't mean it's going to be here tomorrow.
Hopefully soon. We have to be patient. Well, listen, I do watch a lot of minor league baseball nowadays. And back when we were doing the first rebuild, I would see the stars, the star prospects, and then I wouldn't really see much of anything else. I'm kind of like, yeah, that guy's not going to make the majors. That guy doesn't excite me. In certain parts of Birmingham, well, obviously in Charlotte too, and even all the way down to Kannapolis, there are guys that excite me and have more of a chance to play the kind of baseball that you want to watch in the major leagues. I don't know how many of them are going to get here, but I do feel like they are starting to build something in the minor leagues that wasn't there before. They just basically were acquiring all the talent. The drafting, let's be honest, wasn't that great. And they are really trying to bring in more international guys because we haven't had too many success stories in that department either. So I really do hope that there's more to this than what we saw before. And I appreciate all of you for listening and going down this exercise of futility from 2022 and beyond, because sometimes I need it to make sense of what happened and make sense of what's happening now. I need to go back and see and figure out how it all happened, why it did, and when it did, and have you on to kind of guide me through it. It really helped, Vinny, because you and I were a part of it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, I had a great time in Detroit that day. So, I mean, I'm not looking back necessarily with sorrow, but yes, I understand White Sox fans. It's a tough one to look back on for sure.
All right. Well, next time Jack White is in town, which I know was just recently.
It wasn't. I went to see him again, so of course it was great. Nice work there. Everything's coming full circle, Chuck. You're talking to me 2 weeks now after I saw him again. So here you go. That's a real good timing on your part.
How was Jack White today versus 3 years ago?
Well,
besides, he didn't get married here in Chicago again.
No, he didn't get married again. So there was not that novel aspect to this show. I would say this show is better. The new album this time is better. That was, I believe, that day in 2022 he had put out an album that day, and it was not my favorite. This new one from last year was very good. And so to get a lot of those in the show this time, along with obviously all his older stuff, his White Stripes stuff, it was a great show this time at the Salt Shed for sure.
And I could not end the podcast without talking about the person who is over your, left shoulder, right shoulder, depending on what angle we're talking about, yours or mine. There is Bruce Springsteen with the cover of The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle. That is, I actually have that framed. I thought about putting that in my office so everyone could see it, but I think they've got enough Bruce Springsteen coming from my mouth that they don't need to see him on every single podcast. So, but I appreciate you having the man, the myth, the legend, Springsteen over there, over your shoulder.
When you go on with Chuck, you've got to get some Bruce into the decor. So I made sure to make sure that he was visible here behind me.
And I've been feeling the energy of Bruce this entire time. Vinnie Duber, great to have you back here on the podcast. It means a lot. And you can read his stuff in the Sun-Times. White Sox coverage galore from Vinnie Duber. That's a wrap for this edition of the White Sox Podcast with me, Chuck Garfien. Hawk Harrelson. Can you give me a little Hawk Harrelson before we toss it to Hawk?
You want me to do a Hawk impression? What am I saying?
Just say yes.
Chuck, I'll tell you what, Chuck. Our Chuck. What did Chuck find? Mercy, yes.
Okay. Love it. Hawk Harrelson, take it away.
All right, our Chuck, this edition of the White Sox Podcast is over.